Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Tyndall. I am the Executive Director of the Harvard Museums of Science and Culture, where our mission is to foster curiosity and a spirit of discovery in visitors of all ages, enhancing public understanding of and an appreciation for the natural world, science, and human cultures. This mission in mind, I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to tonight's program, We Dance, an exploration of movement, foodways, and environments, co-sponsored by the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology and Harvard's Theater, Dance, and Media program. We are delighted to have Tanya Weidman Davis and Thaddeus Davis, co-directors of the Weidman Davis Dance Company, with us this evening to discuss their work at the intersections of movement, foodways, placemaking, and constructions of Black identity and racial consciousness. Tanya Weidman Davis is the co-director of Weidman Davis Dance and is on faculty as an associate professor at the University of South Carolina in the Department of Theater and Dance and African American Studies. Tanya has danced with many world-renowned companies, in fact, including Dance Theater of Harlem, the Joffrey Ballet, Chicago, Complexions Contemporary Ballet, Alonzo King Lines Ballet, Spectrum Dance Theater, Ballet New York, and others. Weidman Davis has received multiple honors and grants for her work and her academic choreographic research and lectures examine race, gender, femininity, identity, and location. She has recently contributed a chapter in the Oxford Handbook of Contemporary Ballet entitled Dance Theater of Harlem, Radical Black Female Bodies in Ballet. Thaddeus Davis is the co-artistic director of Weidman Davis Dance and associate professor in the departments of theater and dance and African American studies at the University of South Carolina. Through the lens of the African American experience, he questions notions of spaces and environments that affect the intersection of gender, class, race, technology, and media's ability to shape our perceptions. His research findings are exhibited in the creations of original dance works, films, and essays. Davis has received multiple honors and grants for his work as well. We will begin our program with the film We Dance. This 12-minute piece from award-winning filmmakers Ethan Payne and Brian Foster tells the story of how Tanya and Thaddeus came together as a couple and as artistic partners. After the film, Tanya and Thaddeus will engage in a conversation with Sarah Clunas, Director of Academic Partnerships and Curator of African Collections at the Peabody Museum. In many ways, We Dance is more than a film. It truly is an experience. It is a polyvocal rendering of Black interiority and the virtues of multi-generational family, community, and togetherness. It is a love letter to soulful traditions, foodways, culinary ingenuity, connections, and placemaking. It is a monument to the complexity, nuances, and iconicity of Black life and culture. And frankly, it is love and movement personified. Without further ado, I present to you, We Dance.
Our memory is an environment too. My name is Sarah Clunas. I am representing the Peabody Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology tonight, and I'm so pleased to welcome Tanya Weidman Davis and Thaddeus Davis.
Hello.
Hello. It's so great to see you.
Great to see you too.
Yeah, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
You know, it's hard to follow the film. It really is with a conversation. But I do want to talk about how the film grabs us immediately and propels us along with poetry. I want to talk about the movement that we see in the film, the dance, the walking, the cooking, and also through the camera. Nothing is still. It's like a dance in a whirl. And I think for a minute, we get to see what you see for a moment, you know? It's got to be different to be a dancer. And I feel like I had a moment of that with your film. So I would love to focus our conversation tonight on around ideas about cultural knowledge and how your work expresses not only personal narrative, but also provides a document of sorts, a way of recording cultural knowledge. So when we spoke to each other last about the film, you had mentioned that We Dance is not only about your relationship with food and culture and childhood and home and family, but also about your experience as dancers and how you've found yourself in this contested relationship with both food and your body.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you negotiated those things, these complex racialized and gendered discourses? How did it change your relationship to food and to dance?
Yeah, I'll start. I think when we were asked to create this film by the Southern Foodways Alliance, I think I had to come to terms with how to do a film around foodways and movement and my family and migrational patterns and the relationships that I've had to all three. Dance and food have a very contested relationship. Throughout my professional career, I was told that, I needed to lose weight. There was a section in the film that talks about 10 raisins. When I first got to New York and I started dancing with Dance Theater of Harlem and I was in the second company, I had to hand in a food journal. I had to write down what I ate every week. And then at the end of the week, someone would look at that journal and tell me feedback. And so one of the feedbacks comments was, you're eating too many raisins. You ate a small box of raisins. You should only eat 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So thinking about, bringing back that past and thinking about my relationships to foodways with my grandmother and how she was the entry point into so many international foods that I was able to experience when I lived in Chicago because she was a factory worker.
Right.
Yeah,
And Claudius, you sometimes we think of food as gendered, right? Like these body issues as gendered, but you too experience this.
yeah. I think that, being from the South, being a Black male with an interest at some point at 14 or 15 in ballet as a result of football exclusively initially. And then your body is your body. And you never think of your body as being something that you do as a young male, anything other than getting bigger, more muscles, more bigger, and so you think about that as relate to being in the South and sports and athletics, and then going through college and studying dance and training in dance, and weight being, I guess, in the air, but never really directly told to me until I got to New York and was like, oh no, you're too big. You have to be smaller. And you figure that out. And so it is a very contested space that's openly talked about for women, but it's not so openly, men are not confronted with it, but there's a certain where in my experiences from time to time, there would be just like a dressing room kind of hovering that men would kind of police themselves in this kind of overbearing way. But yeah, the idea of what your body is was not particularly a part of my existence growing up in the South. You had your body. It was your body. It was just a body. It wasn't like it needed to look a certain way to do this art form.
And did you find that there was an aspect of race that was somehow enfolded in this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you just think about the medium that we were performing in. We were performing in the ballet medium, which means that our Black bodies were in comparison to the white bodies that were performing ballet. And so the aesthetic is to look like a prepubescent female.
Yes.
And that's what we were trying to live up to. But also the body politics of like, if your thighs were too big, if your butt was too big. So like taking on these, very Africanist perspectives on the body and layering that Europeanist lens onto the Africanist body,
Mhm.
it was a whole nother thing that we had to contend with.
But
Yes.
only really to learn, for me at least, once I got to New York and I was at Dance Theater of Harlem, and I began to tour around a lot with Dance Theater of Harlem around the world, that all the bodies looked the same. There were white bodies that had butts, and there were black bodies that had butts. There were white thighs, there were black thighs. There were thin white thighs and thin black thighs. There were flexed white feet and flex, so that the bodies were like, but there was these ideas of what the black body was that the black ballet dancer couldn't escape. These stereotypes. There was no way of escaping it, because that's who you are, regardless of what I see as I'm looking at you. If I see the skin tone comes with the stereotype, so therefore I cannot discuss any other options for you.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
also being at Dance Theater of Harlem, the Black bodies were international. They were from all over the world. So you got to see, this mixing of, just Africanist culture throughout the world, and the beauty of those bodies, the skin tones, the lusciousness of these beautiful Black bodies who were doing this form and doing it at a very high level.
So there's a moment in the film when one of you says, we gather together here, all of our environments on us, around us, and in us here. And the film really shows us both visually and orally how the past comes together to create a present. Can you tell us a little bit about yourselves? I mean, we do get so much of your story in the film, but it's kind of hinted at. Where are you from? Who are your cultural ancestors? Describe the landscape where you grew up. And how does We Dance trace your individual and collective narratives?
Good.
So I'm from Montgomery, Alabama, and so the film says I'm from the place. Had the Civil War been successful and the South had succeeded from the Union, Montgomery was the capital, the first capital of the Confederacy. And so I'm from that place that also is the home of the Civil Rights Movement. So there's this place of like enslavement being supported, and the struggle for Black liberation. So all of that lives in the air in Montgomery, Alabama. And then I'm on the west side of town. I'm on the Black side of town. And I'm on the side that's near the military base, which I come to find out later in life, where my grandparents bought a house. It was what they could afford, because now we would call that the space for air pollution, because there's aircrafts flying over constantly. And so with that in mind, I'm also in a very protected space. I'm in church all day Sunday. I'm living a really protected life, but yet I still know where the color line is. When you go down Fairview Avenue and you cross a certain street, you're in the white neighborhood. And you have to go that way to get to Alabama State, which is the HBCU that's in town that my mother and her sisters went to school, graduated from. And so all of that shapes these ideas of who I am as a person. And coming from a space where my grandfather, grandmother, great-great-grandmother, and mother raised me and said, you can be whatever you want to be. And so having aspirations to dance was no different. So I didn't really grow up because there was dancing in my home. I didn't grow up with the stereotypes that I learned when I got into this notion of professional dance, that dance has a sexuality attached to it, that it is a femme thing. In my intellectual educational space, I've learned that dance is of the body, and that means that it is of the feminine space, and intellectual thoughts are of the mind, and that's of the masculine space. Well, my whole family was of the feminine space then, and my grandfather included, because we all danced. We danced in church. So all of those things are part of where I'm from.
It seems like that's another very racialized narrative too, though, because as an Africanist and coming from Jamaica, dance is an integral part of masculinity.
Absolutely.
I mean, in most African communities, the traditional masquerades are danced by men. So men are the dancers. So it's just an interesting thing how that really did become racialized as well. So Tanya, tell me about yourself.
So I am originally from Chicago, My mom is from Shuqualak, Mississippi, and my grandmother, who's in the video, is from Shuqualak, Mississippi. So they were a part of the Great Migration. My father is from Chicago, and his family is from McCormick County, South Carolina, and Birmingham, Alabama. So I have Southern roots, but internally, my dad and I were actually born in Chicago. And I grew up in just an environment that was so-called liberal. I grew up in Oak Park, Illinois, and I just had all sorts of foods around me all the time. My next door neighbors were Thai and they babysat me. So I was always over to their house, eating dinner, eating lunch, eating something. And so it flipped my palate differently from my mom and my grandmother and my father's palates, who were more connected to the Southern roots, Southern United States. And so it was just this mixing of my grandmother working in the Stuart Warner was the place where they made car parts. And she worked on the assembly line making car parts. But in that environment, there were just immigrants from all over the world. So they would come at lunchtime and then bring all these different dishes. And then she would try them and she would say, let's go to this restaurant, or let me try and make this that my coworker made. And so it was always this space of, you know, experimentation with food, as she was a great cook and loved to experiment. She was always making something, and even the bad stuff was good. I ate it. And so once, you know, I got to New York, it was like I had to flip how I was thinking about food, because I was in this industry that was saying that your body needs to look a certain way. And I had to come to terms with, you know, what do I need to do in a healthy way to actually get my body to look like I want it to look, and then continue this profession and be successful at it.
I have a question. I'm curious. Now that y'all are your own bosses, right? Like you don't have to keep your food journal anymore, I'm assuming, and things like that, right? So now y'all are your own boss. I mean, like things must have shifted and changed then, right? For you? And you must feel freer and in terms of your body and the foods you eat. And
Yeah, we have totally changed our diet. I mean, when we were dancing in the company together and up until probably our late 30s, we were pretty much just, you know, loving everything that was being made in New York and experimenting in different restaurants. And then we got to a point where we were like, okay, in order to have the energy right now with our bodies right now to dance all day long, we need to shift the way we eat. And so we have changed our diets we're pescatarian. We only eat fish, and we try to be gluten-free as much as possible, because for us now from maybe for me, it was like 35, I started to feel what was like what I was actually putting in my body. And it was right. And it wasn't
giving eat anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't giving me the energy and the sustainability that I needed to maintain throughout the day at the level in which I needed to be physical all day long.
And also the idea of like not wanting to feel not good.
Yeah.
Like to be able to sit down and eat something and go, oh, I don't feel good.
Yeah, you want to feel light though. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
know that it was about like, I just sat there and ate a whole bag of cookies. It was good going down, but
not
right
so good
now,
anymore.
I don't feel so good, but I'm just going to go to bed.
Well, it's good to know that dancers also eat whole bags of cookies sometimes.
Yes, up until about 7 years ago, like you sit down and open a bag, you got to finish it. You can't like just open it and like just eat 2 or 3 and put it in the cabinet. No, you keep it close to you as well, like on the couch with you, you know? So
food can be so comforting. I mean, as we see in your video. And so I think we see a lot the way that you have connected foodways and environment to your stories, you know? So it seems also to me that in the film you are really connecting not only to ancestors, but the ancestors of the lands and all the lands where you reside. Like you're residing in so many different places, and even the different street signs that we see. There's just a lot of geography in the film, which kind of, I think, very much makes sense to the historical African diaspora experience. This sort of, crossing of borders and oceans. And so for me, I think I see a connection very deeply to women and to place and to elders and their work in terms of the care and the nurturing through food that they provided for you. And, one of my colleagues, Brenda, I believe, said that, really she felt that We Dance was really a meditation on food and culinary traditions that shape Black families and communities. So can you elaborate on how you were able to translate that history? Because I really see this in some ways as a historical document, an environment that, like you said, a memory can be an environment too. How did you make the artistic and visual choices that you made? Locations, scenes, ways in which you cropped certain scenes, even that scene that keeps coming back to me over and over again, Thaddeus, of the many yous in the cafeteria. Tell us a little bit about that creative process.
Yeah, so I think that the thing about the film when we first started writing, Ethan Payne and Brian Foster. So Ethan's an independent filmmaker and Brian Foster is a sociology professor at University of Virginia. At the time, he was at University of Mississippi in Oxford. And so we started to have conversations with Brian, who gave us, in essence, a kind of sociological study of ourselves. He sent us a series of questions and we wrote extensively on those questions. He read it. He sent us back more questions. We wrote more extensively. He kept digging and digging and digging. So as we think about the film, we don't particularly say we wrote it, but we wrote on it. And then Brian shaped it and molded it into this narrative that we hear. So the big thing that he kept lifting up is, wow, you guys moved so much. Yeah. So East and West and North and South was about the dancers' migration just to work. Yeah. Though we lived in New York, we were in touring companies. So we spent a limited amount of time actually in the city, though we had a place to live that we paid rent. So, and then at certain times, Tanya moved to the West Coast. And so it was always about, I've done this that I want to do here, but I want to do that thing that they're doing in that place. I got to go and do that. Or I have a gig to go choreograph in Tennessee or something. So there were these periods that we were living around the country and based in New York, but still working around the country. And so that helped shape the many kinds of ways we began to see food as well, because even inside of the country, beyond our own personal narrative with food and history with food, we were going to Austin, Texas, and we lived there for like a year and a half working. And there was this taco place that we would go, and it would stay open till like midnight. And it was always getting out of rehearsal, and that was the place we'd go. We'd go there, and it was like agua fresca was more important to me. The sweet part was more important than the burrito, But I think that, like, as referencing that specific many people, like there was this scene that and one of the things that I'd written about, the first time I remember dance changing me, and it happened in a cafetorium in 5th or 6th grade. After school party, and you're having these kids that go to the party at 3:30 after school. And I remember the song coming on and me dancing in a way that it didn't matter who was around me. It didn't matter who saw me.
Call that catching the spirit.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Catching the spirit, right. And so people laughed, but it didn't matter. Yeah. So the line is, why are they laughing? But it doesn't matter, because something about this movement thing that for whatever reason, I just discovered doing it in front of people that I hadn't ever danced in front of, and it didn't matter. So that was what that scene was about, the multiplicity of yourself looking down and going, I wonder, do they see what I see?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's funny too is you call it the catching the spirit. Well, we have a term in the concert dance world when we were growing up, and it was called getting your life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So
so
it's
you
that
could be
same
on
feeling, right?
stage and you could be like in something and just like in a whole nother world. And you come off and you were like, I was getting my life.
Yeah, yeah. In like Jamaica, you'd hear like if you hear drummings, and then all of a sudden you start dancing, and then you just let go, and it was just
Yes.
like this. And of course, you can see that in the South as well, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
even
And
in,
it's a true transcendent kind of
It really is.
experience that, you
Yeah.
know, maybe you're going into this space and you don't remember what happened before,
Mhm.
during, only after you look back and say, well, I don't know what happened. I
don't know
I was
what
in my
happened.
life. I got my life out, you know, so that's really what it's about.
Well, that leads me into our next question, because John Coltrane always said the music doesn't come from me, it comes through me.
Mm.
And this always inspires me when I'm creating. And not only because it's words from a cultural maker that came before me, but also the idea that things can come through me and I can be a receptacle for the expression of things that are more than me. So at the end of the film, you have all these credits where you're referencing works by, Gwendolyn Brooks and Ralph Ellison. Tell me a little bit about even Nicki Minaj, right? Nicki Minaj,
Yeah.
Beyonce. So tell me a little bit about how you chose these works, why you chose them, and how they came through you.
Some of the visual aesthetics actually were taken from those references. The Invisible Man. So there's a section in the video where it's the lights, and then Thaddeus is in like this dark honey colored space.
The
So
underground.
the underground
Yeah.
component of the Invisible Man and
Yeah.
the lights. And Brian was really pulling from these narratives to sculpt the ways that our writings were actually going to merge with the content that we created. So most of those references were really his references that he was pulling from.
And I think also that the idea was like making a work that's referencing Black existence prior to our own existence. As you say, it's like an archival piece.
Yes.
And so though we weren't intending to make a work to be able to sit down with those other classic African-American contributions to art making, but that's what we really do in general. We want to make works that reflect the existence that Black people have had, both the great things and the things that are not so great. We want to be able to make works that reflect our existence so that we have something to pass on to our future generations, both family and those that are not. So that big collection to me feels like a way of like, this is the space that we're trying to live inside. With Beyonce, she's referencing Daughters of the Dusk. And so that is the white dress, Daughters of the Dusk, onto Beyonce's, I forget what film that was. It wasn't Lemonade. Maybe it was Lemonade.
It was Lemonade.
Right.
Yeah.
So
maybe a little bit of foundation. Formation too.
Yeah. So Daughters of the Dusk, Beyonce, Tanya. So there's these references that keeps streaming through the history of Black art making that we see, that we're not the first to do it. Some other person is doing it now, but it keeps rolling back and back and back, and say the time keeps flipping, but we keep repeating certain cultural aspects that grounds us.
But I think that there's also a through line too, that we can look at this film and look at those artists too. And there's this experiential layering that happens in order to actually make the text, in order to make the dance, in order to make the music. And it's like lived experience.
Yeah.
It's what feeds all of these processes that we're in.
I think one of the things also is that, that as we're older artists working in dance and dance having a very juvenile
identity.
And so as we're older artists working and even wanting to use the language more so movement, though we're still calling it dance, but we're working in dance and movement and of the body. how do we continue that practice, aside from saying we want to get us a group of younger dancers who we can manipulate their bodies and stretch them and kick them and drop them and throw them, and we want to have that, but then there's this other thing that we have to have maturity. We have to have people that have lived life enough to be able to enter into some of those ideas that are just mapped on their bodies and not pushing it, trying to project things that you have no earthly idea what you're trying to project. So I think that's also a part of the kinds of those historic pieces as a way of framing what we're trying to do as well.
And I think we're at the point in our careers too, where we're interested in a multi-generational narrative, because our bodies hold very different spaces. So when we are on the frame or when we're performing, we hold space differently than a 20-year-old. We hold space differently than my 92-year-old grandmother who's in that video, who can just look up and with her cake and just melt you, you know, I mean, so we're open to all of those different perspectives and embodiments.
I think I see it in the way the film kind of marks rites of passage too, right? There's definitely these rites of passage that are marked throughout the film, and they also are connected to geography, and it's so tied to ancestry, which is why I love all of the referencing, and then also the inclusion of the actual lineage, you know, the elders in your family and their influence. And then I think too of the movement, you know, that of y'all going back and forth all the time and thinking of, you know, how really historically our ancestors emancipated themselves through movement, you know, through radical movement, right? Communicated things through body and dance and drums across plantations, through mapping of hairstyles. It's really, really intense how your film enfolds all of that history into this moment. So you have another project, which is really fascinating to me, and I think it would be great to share with the audience tonight. And I just would love to know a little bit about how it's, you know, maybe do you see links with We Dance? It's Migratus Ataraxia. Am I pronouncing
Correct.
it right? Or do you,
Absolutely.
yeah, Migratus Ataraxia. Okay. So I'm going to share some images, and then maybe you could talk to me a little bit about, you know, the project, what it was, and then maybe think about what some of the links really there, if there are links, if you see links between this project and We Dance. Okay, so give me a minute to share. Here we are.
So Migratus Ataraxia is an opportunity for us to take a look, envision, imagine Black imagination, but really to lift up the notion of enslaved Africans' existence in antebellum plantations, despite their bondage. So mostly when we think of enslaved individuals, we wouldn't use the verb enslaved. We just say slaves. And we want to consider that a misnomer, that every day they woke up, they were re-enslaved. That when they were born, they were not enslaved, they were humans. And so this work was about trying to find ways of expressing the humanity, the love that they experienced when they interacted with each other.
And so
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Tanya. I would love to know a little bit about the images as well, but go ahead.
Yes. So Migratus Ataraxia is a site-specific work that we do in antebellum plantations, either urban plantations or rural plantations, depending on the site. And the audience filters through the homes to see different experiences in each of the rooms. So antebellum homes are set up in the 4x4 architectural structure. So there are events happening in each of the rooms, and we guide the audience through so they can meander through the house and see all of the different experiences in each of the rooms. When the performance is over, they're filtered out from the upstairs downstairs into a curated dinner.
So have you done this at different sites, or
Mhm.
is it one site in particular? Where has this taken place?
So the previous image that you saw was at Hampton
go back to
Preston
that now.
Mansion. That's the image in Hampton Preston Mansion in Columbia, South Carolina, which is what's considered a museum home. So in this process, we asked that Hampton Preston, that's managed by Historic Columbia, remove all the furniture. So we were fortunate to be
Wow.
able to work with an executive director of Historic Columbia, Robin Waits, who was like, absolutely, we'll do it.
Right
And
on.
we know that in
Right.
museum homes, that's not something
No.
that they want to do.
Which
And-
is also why we haven't performed in certain houses.
Yeah.
I'm
And
sure.
so this house is very different than in the next image, which is
This one.
a rural plantation home.
Yes. You
So
can
That
this-
see the
had been
difference.
abandoned for 50 years
Yeah.
Where is this? Where
in
is
Harpersville, Alabama.
Uh-huh.
So the idea is that this work travels much like an enslaved individual would that has been sold off. So the work starts in Columbia, South Carolina, and the next date for it was in Alabama. And then the next date for it, which we're going to go back to, it got cut short because of COVID, was in Wilmington, North Carolina. So very much like an enslaved person would be sold off, this work moves around. And as it moves, it uses the state slave codes for that state to build the narrative, as well as the slave narrative, WPA slave narratives, to help build the script that we work with. So each
How-
state has a different script and narrative that we're working with.
I also have a question about improvisation, though, which is so interesting because you're talking about the script, and then I'm like, oh, but do different things happen in different places? Things that are unplanned when you're in the spaces sometimes?
Yes, we have set choreography for each of the rooms, but
Mhm.
depending on the audience, there are things that might be improvisational, because in this particular section right here, these two dancers take audience members and seat them at the table. And so one particular evening in this site, the Klein Wallace home, the woman in the back in the black coat, she is the owner of the home. So the home was willed to her, and she is a descendant of the enslavers. In this particular performance, those two dancers didn't know that they sat across from each other, a white descendant and a black descendant, in the context of that
Oh
performance.
my gosh, that's so deep.
Yes.
I mean, you can't say that was like, that's something else, right? Like
Right.
that's
Yeah.
just,
Yes. Yes.
that's so deep. But I
And
see
then-
some, go ahead.
And
Patty.
then there's the part, so there's a visual and performing artist, Michaela Pilar Brown, who was a part
Is
of this
this-
original production. Yes,
Yes.
right. And
I was
so
going to ask
Michaela-
about this next.
Yeah, so
So we're right on.
she collected artifacts from the community and brought those artifacts into her section of the work to create an installation so that it truly reflects the memories of the community that want to share different aspects of their family. And so again, we're circling back to community very similar, and history and the legacy and elders very similar to We Dance does. And trying to really, again, we say that there were interrupted narratives, there were narratives that we kind of know, and then there were narratives that we just get an opportunity to make up in our imaginative space. And this happened as a result of, having toured some 5 to 10 different plantations across the South during our research process, and being in one house and asking, well, what is that? And they go, oh, they give us a really bizarre answer. And I go, well, is that the original? No, well, none of this is original furniture. We just make it up as if it would be. I said, oh, like Disneyland.
Yeah.
So then that means if you can imagine it being
Becomes a
this way,
set.
we can imagine it being another way. And so there's
Exactly.
this space of like, we want to imagine a different existence, but we have some concrete things, but then we have to free ourselves up so we can be in an imaginative space as well.
So how do y'all see yourselves as maybe transforming art and history? How do you see yourselves as agents of social change?
I don't think we see ourselves as agents of social change, but what we do see ourselves is pushing back on the systems of presenting dance. And so in order to do this kind of work, you have to have buy-in from a presenter who will go to bat for you, who will say, I will go to these plantation homes and get these people to remove all of the furniture to give you access to these homes. Because that's huge. That's the
That's huge.
first step. That's like so many meetings and so many conversations and so many dinners and so many lunches of telling people what we're going to do in the homes, building trust. And so building trust with presenters in order to give you the capacity to do a different kind of work that is not the templated, just perform on a proscenium stage where a certain group of people gets to come in and see it and everyone else doesn't, because these are elite spaces. Proscenium theater spaces are elite spaces. They cost a lot of money. So these kind of interventions, we think of these
Yes.
performances as actually give access to people who may not be interested in going to the proscenium, who may be interested in a more nuanced story about African-American history, African-American imagination, African-American creativity that lives outside of the strictures of that narrow space.
I also think that it's like, so maybe the social justice aspect of it is that you're taking Black life in its mundane existence and realizing how fabulous it is. And you're trying to enliven that memory that we all have. And we're trying to push away from the notion of respectability politics. So that big parts of the civil rights movement was about, we've just talked a lot about recently that the people that were on the march from Selma to Montgomery, the women had on heels because they had to be dressed a certain way in a march from Montgomery to Alabama, to Montgomery to Selma to Montgomery. And so we're thinking about like this sort of sense of efforts towards humanity. And so we're trying to lift up, I think, at this time in history for us, this kind of art making that, this one moment in time, there's a lot of African-American artists making work and being acknowledged for the work they've been doing for a long time. And so we're just really excited to be able to make this kind of work and being able to have our own experiences be referenced in the work that we're making as well.
Tanya and Thaddeus, thank you so much. I really have to say that, especially with both of these works, but especially the work of, entering a space that was originally a very oppressive space for people of African descent, clearing that space out of its furniture.
Yes.
You having control of that, right? When possibly in the past, ancestors had to clean that furniture, adjust that furniture, and then moving bodies through that space freely.
Yep.
That is healing. That is healing. And so you may not see yourself as agents of social change, but I certainly do. You are bringing healing. So thank you so much. I would love to open up our conversation to accept questions from the audience. So people can ask questions in the chat. Okay, so here we have one. It says, could you tell us more about the WPA slave narratives? I have never heard of that. I would love to hear how they became dances, please.
Great. So the WPA slave narratives were a part of Roosevelt's New Deal in getting America back to work. And so they took writers and sent them out into the country to collect American stories. And the American stories that certain writers in the South chose to address were the formerly enslaved people living in the South still. And so most of these people are in their late 70s or 80s during this time, right after the Great Depression. And so each state, we have a collection of books from South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, all the southern states.
Southeast.
Yeah, the Southeast southern states, that it's an entire collection of these narratives. And so the thing for us was, in the image where you saw the men in that sitting around as if they were in a barber shop, the barber is the voice of the enslaved people. And the men in the barbershop and the young boy that's in the barbershop are asking him questions. So the voice of the elder comes out of the barber's mouth, and the other men in the barbershop are asking questions and keeping barbershop sort of riffraff going on.
And they're in contemporary time,
Yeah.
but the barber is in historic.
Yeah.
So they're having this narrative together.
So we're asking him, and again, in South Carolina, there's one set of narratives that shapes a certain. South Carolina's was a state before Alabama. So in South Carolina, they were trying to figure out how to manage their slaves. We learned later that in Alabama, that was a later state, it was established. So then in Alabama, it wasn't about managing them. It was like, we're going to control them. We're going to keep them in their place. So the conversations and the narratives of those pieces were different. And so,
And the slave codes are different.
Yeah. And so having that WPA slave narratives along with the slave codes helped us kind of like ground the way we were thinking about what we were going to do in those different rooms.
Wow. Really a historical document. Really.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a question about working with your family and your and what that was like working with your grandparents and your mother. And can you tell us a little bit about how they, I mean, I can only imagine saying to my mom, okay, we're going to do this now. You're going to bake a cake, or tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So when I told my grandmother about it, she was super excited. And then it came time for her to make the cakes, and she got really nervous. She made like 5 cakes. She was like, oh, this one's not right. Oh, this one's not right. I'm going to make another one. Oh, I need your mother to go get me some more butter because I'm going to make another one. That one's not right. So at the end, she had just had all of these cakes that she had made. And she was threatening us. She was like, you guys are going to take these cakes home. I'm not going to keep them here. So, but I mean, it was really interesting to just kind of see her almost turn back into a kid again, because all focus was on her. All focus was on her practice of cooking. All focus was on like we planned out what she was going to wear, and we planned the scenes, and just, her in that red chair, and we were kind of moving her body so that, she could be angled and have, certain angles that she would be shot from. And she just kind of came to life. Like I knew her when she was in her 40s.
And, she's 92 years old.
Yes.
So
What a way to honor her, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, to just center her.
Yeah.
So special.
Yeah.
What about your family, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I think that, going to work with my mother, it wasn't like I was surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised, but then I was reminded, as Tanya said, how much of a performer my mother was. You tell her to look up and she.
Yes, I saw it.
She'd do something
so
like
lovely
that.
and regal. Yes,
It's just like, okay,
maybe that's where you get it from, though. I mean, you start to see,
Yeah, I mean, so it's just that part of it was like just really a reminder. And then thinking about my mother, those are my mother's parents. So thinking about the performance of going to church, and there was always you get dressed up, you put your best on to go present it. And I never thought about all of the nuanced performances that we do in life, particularly in the South. And everything you dress up to do everything, because it is a performance. Even if you're just going to sit in the congregation, you're performing this thing. So I think that was really exciting to really see my mother, who recently retired, just kind of, as Tanya said, come to life differently than I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, in Jamaica, it's called style and fashion. Yeah. And it's style and fashion, and you're posing off, and on Sunday, it's the hats. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yes.
Drive all over the country.
Yeah.
And, it just makes me, coiffure, to cover the head, to adorn the head, to add to the head. This is so African. You know what I mean? Like we really never forgot how important that was. So I have a question about the working with the filmmakers to create the scenes and the things. And I know you've answered that a little bit before, but this seems to be like a question coming from someone who does film themselves. So if you could reflect a little bit on that, like what that process was like.
So we shot 2 days in Chicago, and did we do 2 days
Yeah.
in Montgomery?
2 days in Montgomery.
And we had to pick out specific locations that we were interested in. We did that actually before we even started shooting. We kind of made a list of spaces, but we took so much film footage. I mean, we have so much that didn't even end up in the film
Yeah.
that we actually use in a performative component, because we have a
Oh,
performative
great.
component to this work as well. But yeah, it was long days. It was waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning so that we could be at Lake Michigan, so we could get the sun doing a certain thing. And it was just going from site to site, looking at and thinking about the narrative in which we had written, and then trying to think about visually what would connect with those narratives that we wrote.
Were
Yeah,
you
we
part
wrote-
were
Yeah,
you
we-
part of the editing process? I mean, like,
No,
obviously,
No.
no.
this was, and this was like, we usually edit
Yeah,
ourselves.
we
So we
usually
had to
do.
step back and let someone else do it. We were actually a little scared of what was going to
Of
come out,
course.
but we saw it and we were like, amazing.
Yeah, we had seen a film that they had done before, and so we knew the kind of depth that they could bring to a subject. But I mean, really about the locations literally followed the script. I mean, when we talked about the dance that I did in the cafeteria, we went and found a cafeteria. We talked about me being a football player. We went to the football field. We talked about Tanya at the Area Crown. We went to that building and we shot in. So the locations were specific to the lives that we lived. And so it made it kind of easy in that regard. We didn't have to try to, the one thing we did kind of slip in and try to slip past was the notion of Broadway, because it's Broadway in Chicago and not Broadway in New York.
Right,
Because
right.
we didn't shoot in New York.
Because we couldn't take everybody to New York. We had a limited budget, so it was like Chicago and South.
Funny how that happens,
Alabama.
huh? You decide
Yes.
everybody goes to New York and all of a sudden it's astronomical.
Right. But in general, I think that the shot selection was really driven. The visuals were driven. Location was driven by the narrative, but the kind of cinematography, the cinematic perspective, Ethan brought that to the film.
Wow. So we have one last question. Do you have any plans to perform in the Cambridge, Boston area? We would love to see your company, is what they're asking. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the fact that you are coming here in a couple of weeks.
Yes, we are. What are the dates that we're coming? It's March.
It's a week of March 7th, right? March 6th.
It's during our spring break. I have my phone out and I'm going to give
Right.
you
Oh,
exact
Elrod
date.
said March 7th through 12th.
Yes.
So we'll be
Yeah,
on
yeah.
campus and we'll be doing panel discussions. We'll be teaching classes. We'll be having conversations, and
So
we're
exciting.
really, really excited to come.
But we're working on, we're in conversation with Lisa Barbash, whose name I can say her last name over here, at the Peabody, about the potential of a longer residency.
Yes.
Nothing's promised, but we're just in really good conversations to start working towards a residency that would allow us to do performance in multiple things at the Peabody Museum. So
It would
And
be
also
really
do something new.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
great.
I think
Yeah.
we really need it too. I mean, to tell you the truth, I mean, I think that Harvard's campus and the Peabody, like, as I said before, your work is healing work, and you really make contact and you really catch the spirit. And I think that's part of what needs to happen in many places on
Yeah.
this, in this country. But, it would feel very special to have you here with us. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know Brenda's going to come on and say her last goodbyes, but this has
Okay.
been special and magical. And I
Yes.
really, really appreciate spending time with you.
Oh, likewise.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Indeed, indeed. I echo Sarah's comments. Tanya, Thaddeus, thank you so much for giving the world we dance, for really the interventions in your work, for sharing your spirit, your stories, and your genius with us tonight. I feel full and fuller for being able to sit at your feet this evening. Also, special gratitude to Sarah, the Peabody Museum, Harvard's Theater, Dance, and Media Program for partnering on this event. And my deepest gratitude really to our captive audience for joining us this evening. To learn more about HMSC and our programs this season, please visit us at www.hmscharvard.edu. Take good care.